You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday 1st of August 2014. Families barred from Birmingham Cinema for not being Muslim. Cameron faces furious row with Brussels after EU threat to wreck immigration crackdown. Large-scale immigration will be bad for Britain's economy, according to a Cambridge University professor. Italy, bin Laden's buy 50% stake in Carrera Marble Company. Foreign births in Italy up 282% in the past 10 years. US Army in Europe to get German Chief of Staff. An interview with the new acting chairman, Adam Walker. Algeria fears Al-Qaeda airlines as Libyan Islamists control 10 civilian airplanes. Gaza's next disaster, no cement for rebuilding, they've used it all for tunnels. Russia concerned by reports of Kiev using ballistic missiles in eastern Ukraine. Thought for the day, Ebola, threat or promise. And finally, 2 for 1 day, Friday. UK news. Families barred from Birmingham Cinema for not being Muslim. Furious cinema goers say they were turned away from a busy Vue complex because they weren't Muslim. Leon Jennings, 22, had been visiting Birmingham's Star City Entertainment Complex with 2 other friends. But as he tried to enter the Vue Cinema on the site, which includes dozens of bars and licensed restaurants, he said he was turned away by a burly security guard. Asked why, shocked Leon said he was told by staff the films showing were only for couples and families celebrating the end of Islamic festival Eid. Vue Cinemas have apologised and promised an investigation. Movies available at the time in the 25-screen, 5,000-seat complex included In-Betweeners 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Hercules, The Nut Job and How to Train Your Dragon 2. World at 8. Absolutely disgusting in one's own country. I remember a time when you didn't see any Muslims in the general entertainment places. They simply didn't spend their money in the UK. Must have got a group religious reduction for this lot. Cameron faces furious row with Brussels after EU threat to wreck immigration crackdown. David Cameron was facing a furious new row with Brussels after European Union officials threatened to wreck his latest immigration crackdown. The European Commission signalled that the Prime Minister's plans for extra curbs on welfare claims by migrants could be in breach of EU law. In a chilling warning to Downing Street, they vowed to investigate his remarks to find out whether the blitz on benefits was incompatible with EU obligations to treat all citizens equally. But the broadside from Brussels was angrily dismissed by Number 10 insiders this afternoon. A senior government source hit back, "On this issue we would not be clearer. We are confident these plans are fully compliant with the law." World at 8. If not, let the UK deport all EU migrants back to the EU and then they can pay their benefits instead of us. We might be short of a few cheap workers for a while, well at least until the Muslims decide to leave, but we would survive. Large immigration will be bad for Britain's economy, according to a Cambridge University professor. Large-scale immigration will have a negative effect on living standards, according to a Cambridge University economist. Professor Robert Rotham also said any economic benefits from immigration will be outweighed by pressures imposed by a much bigger population. In a report on economic consequences of immigration, the economist said any gains would be small compared to strains placed on amenities such as housing, schools and hospitals. His findings have been outlined in a report published by right-wing think tank Civitas, which said GDP as a whole would grow but GDP per capita would be only marginally affected by a projected population growth forecast for the coming century. The emeritus professor of economics said unrestrained population growth would eventually have a negative impact on the standard of living through its environmental effects such as overcrowding, congestion and loss of amenities. Such losses would ultimately outweigh the small gain in average wages apparently resulting from mass immigration, he added. Mr Cameron and the Home Secretary want to cut net migration, the difference between migrants leaving and arriving in the UK, to below 100,000 by the general election on May 7th next year. But this target is moving further out of reach, as most recent figures from the Office for National Statistics, ONS, showed net migration increasing to 212,000 in the year to December, from 177,000 the previous year. World date. What I love are the terms would have and will. The time is well past for that, as our infrastructure is already crumbling, and still we are being called upon to pay for the building of thousands of new homes on arable land to accommodate these greedy foreigners. European news. Italy. Bin Laden's buy 50% stake in Carrera Marble Company. The Bin Laden family has invested €45 million to buy 50% of the company that controls Marmi Carrera, which has permits to 1/3 of the white marble quarries in northern Tuscany, ANSA sources said Thursday. The acquisition was made by Saudi Arabia's Construction Products Holding Company through its subsidiary Marble and Granite International. They are part of the Bin Laden family's construction industry conglomerate, which has long held ties with marble producers in Carrera. World date. Oh God. Marble for more sodding mosques or palaces for these terrorists. Foreign birds in Italy up 282% in past 10 years. Between the years 2001 and 2011, there were 608,623 foreign birds in Italy, representing an increase of 282.6% for that 10-year span, National Statistics Bureau Istat said Wednesday. More than half these births come from citizens of just 4 countries: Morocco with 15.2% of the total, followed by Romania, Albania and China. Families reporting at least one foreign member increased by 164% in the same 10-year period, comprising a total of 1,160,101 households. The significant influx of foreigners in the past 10 years translates into families putting down stronger roots in Italy with the arrival of relatives, Istat said. In the same 10-year period, Italy granted citizenship to 607,000 people. 2/3 were female, 47.8% were from other European countries and 23.7% were from Central and South America. World date. Doesn't make them Italian or patriotic to Italy any more than it does over here. A disaster for Europe in the making. How much longer must we accommodate such people in the name of so-called humanity? What about European humanity? US Army in Europe to get German Chief of Staff. A German will for the first time become Chief of Staff of the US Army in Europe, a sign of further cooperation between the two nations despite a chill caused by allegations of US spying here. Brigadier General Markus Lebenthal from Germany's Bundeswehr will report to Lieutenant General Donald Campbell, the US Commander for US Army Europe, known as USAREUR, with headquarters in Wiesbaden, Germany. This is a bold and major step forward in USAREUR's commitment to operating in a multinational environment with our German allies, General Campbell said. The appointment of a German to the position has been several months in the making and is part of the US Army's strategy to internationalise the command of its overseas operations. World at 8. Makes the last war even more laughable, doesn't it? A German in charge of European American operations. Catch me while I fall about laughing. There now follows an interview with Adam Walker, the new acting chairman of the British National Party. Good afternoon, Adam, and how are you keeping?
Hi, Lynn, I'm fine, thanks.
Jolly good. This is your first time on World at 8. One of the first questions I've got is what was the trigger mechanism that got you first involved in nationalist politics as opposed to what you might have been previously?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it was actually by visiting another country and experiencing different cultures in other places that got me into nationalism in this country. You would have thought it. I mean, often at the times we get labelled with the racist bigot kind of stick, don't we? And it's quite the opposite, because it was by being in those areas that I appreciated what I had in my own home country.
I presume you mean that was it Japan you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I lived there for 6 years, and while I was there, I was at the Pacific Ring, and I visited loads of places in that area, you know, and I got to see how important different cultures are, and you know how precious they are, and so people can go and visit them and experience them. And you know, it was when I actually came back to this country, having been away for such a long time, that I realised that there was something drastically wrong with this country.
True. Well, I mean, the Japanese could give us a few lessons on nationalism anyway. They're very nationalistically minded, and
Yes.
And of course over there it's not a sin to be nationalistically minded. It's a good thing, which doesn't really translate to our European attitude to it.
Well, exactly, you know, and I mean, they're a very proud nation. They're proud of who they are, and they're proud of their traditions and their culture.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I used to, while I was there, I used to see people coming from different countries, and they would visit the temples in Kyoto, and, you know, they'd visit Tokyo, and they would experience Japanese culture. Now, you know, that got me thinking when I turned back up in London, and I was thinking, well, you know, this isn't quite the London that I remember. It's changed dramatically in the time that I've been away, and you could be forgiven for thinking you could be anywhere in the world, you know.
Understand, in fact, really.
Yeah, indeed, you know, and I mean, you can walk around Kyoto and you know you're in Japan.
Yes.
So, and that's really important for a country to have that, because then people can appreciate that culture, you know. But what in certain parts of our country, you wouldn't know where you were.
No, quite true. And even when you turn on the television, you don't really know where you are, really, nowadays, because all the presenters and everybody else are all foreign. You know, there are very few British or English presenters and interviewers and newscasters and weather girls available now. It's, you know, you turn on the television, you could be in mid-air, you could be in Calcutta, frankly.
Yes. Indeed, I mean, but of course we shouldn't blame others for this situation. You know, I mean, we've got people from all over the world come to our country, and you know, some of them have a positive contribution. You know, when they come in and they're taking part in their holidays, or you know, a bit of sightseeing and various things. But you know, we can't blame people for coming to this country and taking an advantage of a situation that they're allowed to take advantage of. I mean, that's what humans do. You know, one of the reasons I was in Japan was because I was earning quite good money there, you know, and I was taking advantage of a situation that I found myself in. Yeah. And you know, I didn't seek to change their culture in any way. I tried to integrate myself as best as possible. I learned their language. I learned martial arts there as well.
Yeah.
You know, I had to have a sponsor while I was there. I had to be earning so much money while I was there. I was paying my tax, and I was doing my best to fit in.
Yes.
You know, but on the other side of the scale, we have people come to our country and they do the exact opposite. Yeah, and it's not acceptable, but we can't blame them for doing it. They're only doing it because they can.
Well, they're doing it mainly because the words got out that the English put up with it. And the English government encouraged them, whichever government happens to be in power at the time. They encouraged them, and there are very few things actually brought into, few laws brought in to contain them once they're here, which is something that does exist in Japan. A foreigner works in Japan, and he is referred to as a gaijin. He's referred to as a foreigner in front of his face. It's not an insult; it's a fact.
Yeah, I mean, you get an alien registration card in Japan, so you're not just a foreigner, you're an alien.
You're an alien, and there's no shame in it. You're there to work, you pay your taxes, and that's the way they view them. You see, and I think it's a healthier way of having people in a country, so they don't actually settle with their entire tribe at one stage and start claiming benefits and outbreeding us. That's just my personal opinion. Of course, I'm sure it's not the BNP's one, but it's mine. So we can probably cut that one out. So we came back here, and you got involved with nationalist politics. Did you actually join the British National Party then, or did you join another nationalist group?
No, well, that's the thing, because you know, I came back here, and I was having a little look around. I thought that, you know, I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong, but you know, as we do, us inquisitive type, we start to dig a little bit, and we look at various things, and we look at what we think is right and what we think is wrong, and we start to look for answers.
Yes. So, well, that shows me on to the next question. Then, how did you first get involved with the British National Party?
Well, that kind of ties in with what I've just been saying there, because basically, my hometown, Spennymoor in County Durham, very nice little town. It's where I've been born and bred, and I lived there until I was 16, till I joined the armed forces. But when I first awoke into politics, and particularly nationalist politics, I had a little look around at all the other parties, and I was thinking, well, is that for me? And I had a look at the Labour Party, and I thought, no, definitely not. That's not me. Did the same with the Conservatives, the Lib Dems. I mean, those were the three main parties in our town. There was no others at that point in time. Right. And I was looking at all of them, and none of them sort of catered for my needs and for my way of feeling. And then that's when I found the British National Party. Right. I had a little look at what our policies are and were at that time, and I thought, yes, this is me. I've found a home. Because up until that point, I thought I was very strange and weird in the way that I was thinking. Yeah, well, people do it, Lynn. I mean, we're so brainwashed to believe certain things by the mainstream media. Some of us often think that we're islands unto ourselves until we come across people such as ourselves. Yeah. And when we do, it's a breath of fresh air, and that's what happened to me. And I stood as a candidate in the area because there was nobody else. Right. Nobody else that catered for my views, catered for my thought patterns and my way of how I wanted things to be. There was nobody else, so I stood as a candidate and offered the people a real choice. And I thought, well, at least I'll get one vote, and it'll be my own, and the rest is history.
Tottering along and voting for yourself is quite good, actually. So, how many years have you been in the party, Adam?
Well, I joined in 2006, right. So it's quite a while now, and then I was just, I was so excited to get my membership card, and I was talking to the guy in the pub, and I was saying, I think I'm going to join, and he was saying, yeah, I think I am as well. So we joined together, and we got our cards together, and it was great, we were card-carrying members because that was us making our stand,
Yes, yes. I must admit, I've got 2 years on you anyway, because I joined in 2004, but I must admit it was a great relief to actually meet like-minded people and not feel that you were a freak for having certain views that you have. And it's a shame, actually, that sort of... how can I put it? It's a shame that the English haven't adopted that sort of all-encompassing nationalist thing. They haven't really adopted it, which is, of course, the result of propaganda, negative propaganda, which is still going on. Now, I've got a rumour here that you can break breeze blocks with your bare hands. Now, I'm going to ignore striding over tall buildings and wearing your underpants on the outside. Yeah. But is that true? Can you break breeze blocks? You try saying that after a couple of beers.
Indeed.
Yes.
Well, I think that's probably come from my martial arts background, Lynn. I think I alluded to it there earlier. Yes. When I lived in Japan, I started training. I'd always wanted to do some type of martial art, and when I was there, I thought, wow, this is the best place in the world to learn such a thing. And I started off in a class, a karate class. I was a big, tall, thin gaijin, as you said. It's when I had long hair and I weighed about 30 kilograms less. Oh God! And basically, what it was is, I studied there 3 times a week. Yeah. And I actually ended up teaching in that class, and as a black belt, and speaking Japanese and teaching the Japanese their martial art in their own language.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Have you actually carried that on since you came back?
Yeah, well, I do have my own club now, and I've had it for 14 years, so I teach there regularly, and I'm still in touch with some of my Japanese friends. Yeah. But it just goes to prove that if you want to, you want to integrate, and if you want to try hard, you can. And people respected me for that. Yes. It started off, they were quite brutal, quite nasty, because I was the tall foreigner who was whose grandfather had been engaged in wars with the kamikaze and
yes, I mean, the war, yes, it certainly, it probably wouldn't have helped, but that is the one thing actually, although certain aspects of, I mean, my half-brother was taken prisoner by the Japanese at Changi, so it wasn't too pleasant. He never discussed it. But, you know, you do have to admire the way they do stick to their culture. Even in today's world, which is so sort of diversity-ridden, it is nice to find a country that actually is proud of its culture, and although it welcomes foreigners who work and integrate, and then they go back home preferably, they still hold on to the core of what essentially is Japanese, and I think that's something that we English have lost drastically.
Yeah, it is, and I mean, we've got this term multiculturalism.
Oh, yes, it's
multiculturalism is actually, it means the death of cultures, you know, which is, as far as I'm concerned, is total and utter racism.
Yes.
You know? I mean, to kill off cultures for the sake of multiculturalism is the you couldn't get much more racist than that, and yet we were led to believe that multiculturalism is a great thing, and I don't believe it is.
No, I certainly am very anti. I'm very, very anti, as you know, probably the rest of the party know. But I don't mind a cosmopolitan society, you know, slightly mixed with the odd, you know, person in it. But I mean, nowadays it's absolutely overkill. It's reached the stage now where we were full up 20 years ago.
Yeah, but when it gets to the point where cultures and various people from different areas are forming their own communities and refusing to integrate into their host country, I mean, that isn't multiculturalism. That's, you know, it's like separatism, you know.
It is, and trying to impose their particular ethos on people, and complaining when they can't do it, I think is reprehensible. I think it's disgusting. Now, you are now new. Are you acting chairman, or acting chairman? Are you, or chairman?
Yeah, acting's the formal title. Yes, yeah.
Oh, right. Now, have you got any plans to do any new broom sweeping, or bring in your own ethos or your own ideas, or?
Well, I think the most important thing at the moment, I mean, obviously there's a transition period. Nick's been in as chairman for 15 years almost, and he's done a fantastic job, you know, and it's great to have him at my side, or giving me advice. And it's, you know, he's a minefield of knowledge. He's been in the cause for many years now, decades, you know, and to have somebody like him, you know, work beside is really good. Obviously, we've got a transition period now where we're going through things and we're ironing out various differences that we have. I mean, I'm a different person altogether to Nick, so I will be doing things differently.
Yeah.
The way things are, you know, I mean, nobody's exactly the same, but hopefully we'll keep on the same course. Like I say, the most important thing is to make sure that our membership are happy, you know, by getting the basics into place, such as the memberships. Bulletins going out regularly, keeping people informed. I'd like to spend some time and effort on training and education too. You know, I mean, it's something we've done in the past, and it's something I'd like to build upon in the future as well.
Yes, I think it would probably help if, speaking from the grassroots level, and right the way down south, of course, which is a long way away from the mothership, as one might say, of the BMP. I think that we will have to, the regional organisers will have to send out sort of a couple of sheets of whatever, just explaining to their organisers what they actually should do.
Yes.
And their contacts, because I know quite a few people really don't. I mean, they're very worthy and they're trying to do a job, but they really don't know, you know, the format for doing the job, and that's quite difficult, I think.
Yeah, but we do have on resources on the website, we do have a section there for organisers and for officials and various people. But something I'd like to work on as well is discipline too. You know, I mean, we're fighting for our survival here. And we're a fighting force, and we've got to make sure that, you know, that we are well trained and well equipped. And that's something I would like to look into in the future as well.
Yes. So do you think you'll be having sort of, when we get sort of started, you might start up something like the summer school training or something like that again.
Most definitely, yes. And maybe it's travelling around the country too. I mean, often of the times we'll sit in meetings and listen to somebody give a speech for an hour and a half, you know. I mean, that hour and a half, that part of that could be used to learn, as opposed to, you know, just listen to somebody just talk about whatever subject it is. I mean, that's fine. I don't see a problem with that. But, you know, if there's something that needs to be passed over, then I would suggest that would be a good use of time too, you know.
Yes, I think probably we also need to, of course, get the equipment, sort of like the screens up and the various things if we want to illustrate various things might be a great help for, you know, later on. I'm not talking about now, but later on, perhaps next year after the elections.
Yes, indeed. And what we've also got to remember is that people need to realise that we're in this for the long haul. There are no short-term games in this, like short-term gains in this game. It's a long marathon as opposed to a quick sprint. And people need to know that, and they need to know that they've got to dig themselves into their communities, become respected in that community, you know, and be the leading light in that community, and almost act as a counsellor before they even are a counsellor, you know. Yes,
that's true. Well, I think in some respects the British National Party have done a marvellous job as a sort of influence, because now people are discussing immigration, whereas 2 or 3 years ago it was a hushed-up subject. It simply was not discussed, except for maybe a week or 2 days before an election or something like that, and immigration came up. And now it's actually at the forefront of I think, all the political parties for next year's general.
Yeah, I think you'll find a lot of the things we've talked on over the years, Lynn, have come to the forefront recently. You know, I mean, the child grooming, for example.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and the immigration. These are all subjects that we've been talking about for years and years, and people have chosen not to listen, but they are starting to listen now. And what people will realise is that we're the ones that tell the truth, and we're the ones we're not just the ones who are telling what they want to hear now. We've been telling it for years, and we will continue to tell it.
Yes. And I think that's quite right. Publish and be damned is actually my motto, whether they like it or not, as you might have gathered. But we'll wind this up now, and we'll let you go on to your, working out what you're going to do. And we'll wait with bated breath, Adam. And certainly there will be a conference this year, I trust, will there?
Yeah, we're looking at November time for the conference. I've got somebody looking in the venues at the moment, so hopefully we're looking around the Midlands, Lynn, so that would be better for you.
Yeah, it certainly would be, yes. I mean, apart from the fact Blackpool is not my most favourite place, I'm afraid.
Yes, well,
the hotel we stayed at was hilarious, because poor Dale had just got over his heart attack, and our bedroom was on the 5th floor and no lift.
And you've got to remember that it's very grim up north too, so, you know...
It is bloody grim.
We've got to remember where the Industrial Revolution started, so... We can't knock the north that much.
No, well, I wouldn't knock the north. No, actually, met some charming people up the north. It's just, to me, there's no civilisation north of the Thames. I'm a Londoner. Okay, Adam, it's lovely speaking to you.
You too, Lynn. You take care.
And I hope we repeat this at some future date.
Indeed. Well, we're all wired up now, so any time will do.
We are. Lovely. Good luck and bye-bye.
World news. Algeria fears Al-Qaeda airlines as Libyan Islamists control 10 civilian planes. The intelligence services of countries around Libya are carefully monitoring the situation at the airport in Tripoli after an unconfirmed report claiming that Islamic armed militia are in possession of 10 civilian planes. According to Algerian daily Al-Kabar, Tunisian, Algerian and Moroccan security services have intensified consultations and checks over the possibility, reportedly considered unlikely, though not impossible, of possible terror attacks with civilian planes like the September 11, 2001 attack in the United States. The source quoted by the report said countries considered as enemies like Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco could become targets. France, Italy, Spain, Malta, Greece and Egypt have allegedly alerted their air defence systems against the reported grave threat. World at 8, probably too late, well that is if they've learnt to take off and land yet. Gaza's next disaster, no cement for rebuilding. They used it all for tunnels.
For years before the latest hostilities, Hamas, the Palestinian political organisation, complained that Israeli restrictions on cement imports into Gaza were preventing the population from constructing homes, schools and hospitals. As it turns out, a large share of the cement that did reach Gaza went into building underground lairs and attack tunnels for fighters from Hamas. The Israel Defence Forces, IDF, estimate that each of the 36 underground passages that troops have found so far required 350 truckloads of building supplies. Here's the dilemma: Gaza is going to need major reconstruction. In addition to countless homes and a hospital that Hamas commandeered, the Israeli bombardment has destroyed 50 factories that produced food products, soft drinks and textiles, amongst other goods, according to Ali Al-Hayek, Vice President of the Palestinian Federation of Industries. But if cement imports resume, what's to stop Hamas, which runs the enclave, from again taking or smuggling it to rebuild its underground military infrastructure? That strategy would doubtless provoke Israeli retaliation and a likely repeat of the current conflict. World at 8. The trouble with the Middle East is that firstly it has oil and secondly Muslims with no independent thinking other than from the Quran. Simplistic but true. Russia concerned by reports of Kiev using ballistic missiles in eastern Ukraine. Moscow is concerned by reports that Ukraine's government troops have used ballistic missiles against independent supporters in the country's east, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Wednesday. Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko Tuesday confirmed the country's readiness to provide access to international experts to the crash site of the Malaysia Airlines passenger plane in Donetsk region, declaring a unilateral ceasefire within a 20-kilometre 12-mile radius. Now, unfortunately, actions suggest the opposite. Donetsk, Luhansk and other villages in these regions are being shelled with Grad rocket launchers, artillery and tanks. On Tuesday, citing US officials, CNN reported that Ukraine's government troops used short-range ballistic missiles in the east. The weapons have a range of about 50 miles and pack warheads of up to 1,000 pounds. World at 8. A clear message not to fly any passenger planes within miles of those areas. Thought for the day: Ebola, threat or promise? Now, if you've listened thus far to the news, you will have noticed that when doing the allowed TV reports on the Ebola crisis, that so far the media are honing in on the Africans who have been helping and treating the Ebola victims. Nothing much has been said for why Europe is at risk from this terrible virus at all. In the days before the Channel, air travel, sea or land migration, this illness stayed in Africa, where one strain was first noticed in 1976 and originated because the Africans, in their wisdom, decided to eat bushmeat, and was mainly monkey meat, endangered species of whatever kind, and the fruit bat, all of which don't develop strains of this disease by themselves, but are in turn infected by either eating or picking up faeces or infected blood from other animals or each other. The first reported case of the deadly virus came in 1976 and is named after the Ebola River in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was where it was discovered. At the time, the area where the disease was spotted was officially recognised as Zaire. The virus has since spread throughout the region. Non-human primates, like gorillas and chimpanzees, have been cited by the World Health Organization as possible infection sources for humans, but experts have realised that they are not the source of the problem. The apes have been deemed as accidental hosts, meaning that they catch the disease and then pass it along, but are not the initial reservoir source that produces the virus. There are 5 different strains of the disease, 4 of which can spread to humans, while the 5th only affects primates. Now, I'm not a doctor or an Ebola specialist, but in order for many strains of this disease to spread, it means that Africans are either eating or having sex with an infected animal. I prefer to think they're cooking and eating them myself, but you never know. It isn't called the Dark Continent for nothing. My point being, do the British authorities think that when these people, both from West Africa and indeed the entire African continent, migrate over here, that they do not try to re-establish their eating methods in this country? They do, and it may only be a rumour, but it has been said that the last terrible foot and mouth disease to wipe out thousands of our own cattle was brought over here by a parcel of bushmeat sold on a London market. Now, whether this is true or partially true, it does open the door to the fact that our government has been ignoring for years the huge influx of Africans from all corners of Africa and their predilection to stick to their tribal methods of eating. They can't hunt in this country, but they can import, and import they do on a vast scale, both live and dead animals to either sell on or eat. There are no sanctions in place or rules as regard these imports. If they can get through a corrupt official or officials who might also be African, they will. The RSPCA always seems vaguely surprised at the dead and suffering live creatures brought in, with the now well-known British whine of "didn't know it was happening and we'll have to have a 5-year committee meeting to prevent it happening again" scenario. Now, HIV and Ebola came out of Africa, and HIV didn't wait 5 years for a committee, and Ebola won't either. In fact, influenza and SARS came from China, and the Nipah virus from Malaysia, along with grotty aircraft, and we in the UK give homes to peoples of those countries by the million. The one fact which has been ignored as probably not fitting in with the wonderfully diverse idea of this being a welcoming multiracial society is that Ebola doesn't recognise ethnic barriers. It only recognises hosts and carriers, in whatever form they may be, alive or dead, cooked or uncooked, handled or eaten. On the TV last night, a frazzled-looking health worker or something semi-official from the airport at Manchester was actually debating washing down bits of the reception areas in that airport and was upset that it was mainly carpeted. I almost threw the TV out of the garden. What a numpty! I can just see a horde of Asian cleaners nonchalantly flicking a duster down a few chairs whilst the African migrants waddle past with their carriers and their brought in food. Ebola is not always noticed in a patient, and certainly not in a carrier, who could have got the disease, survived it, but is still spreading it. And Cameron or any other politician is not telling me that now, with this ever-increasing crisis, that the Africans are going to be stopped from coming to Italy and travelling through the continent over to the UK. Europe doesn't want them, and we don't seem to have the balls to stop them. So what is the answer? Do we just sit down and just wait for a committee to tell us what comes next? Or do we tell us to man up, make quick rulings to physically stop anything from Africa coming in until the year dot would suit me, but of course I'm not a nice person. African immigrants already over here, whether legal or illegal, will get their relatives out of Ebola zones, claiming a right to family life, which they left behind to make money. And the rate of African migrants coming in will treble in a short time, and no one will even report it until it might be too late. Once over here, they usually slide over to the nearest African communities, which are always jam-packed in heavily enriched areas like London. Then, like leprosy, which is like TB now back in this country, Ebola will spread like wildfire if not prevented. And like diversity in Islam, it isn't racist. So the UAF and other stupids can die just like anyone else, even nationalists, a painful and unnecessary death due to their all-encompassing anti-racist views. And all because people don't listen, people don't report, and everything that is deemed not in the national interest or what could incite racial hatred is never reported until well over. Ebola in the UK is preventable now. We should have heavily monitored air passage into this country by the army or guys who have families and are interested parties, not some African migrant who only wants to help out his brothers at a price. Immigration from Africa should be stopped immediately, and even North Africa, as West Africans are capable of walking hundreds of miles to get to Europe, and to be honest, one black man does look much like another in a group. Of course this would immediately be deemed racist. But is it Europe's fault that this virus originated and is perpetuated in Africa? No, it isn't. It may be the fault of a few ignorant Africans, but facts are facts. Africa at the moment has something that is not Muslim necessarily, that we do not want or need over here. Our indigenous tribes are drastically underbred at the moment, and we don't have the need or ability to produce 10 kids per family. So what would happen if what we had was infected and died? Just how many parents would say, "Oh, I'm so glad we didn't stop these poor people coming in. Even though I've lost my children, I'm still a good person." No, you're not. You're as stupid and short-sighted as our government, and I just hope that our people can bring some sort of pressure to bear to prevent migration from Africa continuing, because whereas it might only be 1 in 100 of the migrants coming over who is a carrier, it only needs one, and a gathering of ready and waiting recipients in cramped surroundings to blossom into flowers of blood. Not rivers of blood, but flowers. And finally, 2 for One Day Friday. A few helpful hints. 1. If you're choking on an ice cube, don't panic. Simply pour a cup of boiling water down your throat and presto, the blockage will be almost instantly removed. 2. Clumsy. Avoid cutting yourself while slicing vegetables by getting someone else to hold them while you chop away. 3. You can avoid arguments with the missus about lifting the toilet seat by just using the sink. 4. For high blood pressure sufferers, simply cut yourself and bleed for a few minutes, thus reducing the pressure in your veins. Remember to use an egg timer. 5. A mousetrap placed on top of your alarm clock will prevent you from rolling over and going back to sleep after you hit the snooze button. 6. If you have a bad cough, take a large dose of laxatives, then you'll be afraid to cough. 7. Have a bad toothache, smash your thumb with a hammer and you'll soon forget all about the toothache. 8. Sometimes we just need to remember what the rules of life really are. In life you only need 2 tools, WD-40 and duct tape. If it doesn't move but should, use the WD-40. If it should not move and does, use the duct tape. And 9. Remember, everyone seems normal until you get to know them. And a woman went into a local chemist, walked up to the pharmacist, looked straight into his eyes and said, "I would like to buy some cyanide." The pharmacist asked why. The woman replied, "I need it to poison my husband." The pharmacist said, "Lord have mercy, that's against the law." "Absolutely not." The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a picture of her husband in bed with the pharmacist's wife. The pharmacist looked at the picture and replied, "You didn't tell me you had a prescription." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend.